Okay, so I wanted to give you an idea of what this first kinesiology exam coming up is going to look like. So, kinesiology 1 exam coming up this weekend here. It's one of a few kinesiology exams that you're going to have. This one, I'll tell you about the format towards the end when after I talk about everything that's kind of going to be on it. So the first thing would be to simply describe the anatomical position. So we've talked about that in one of the first days, one of the first kinesiology days, but basically just think of that man with the palms forward and the feet kind of slightly down there. Think about how that would be described. If you have a question about that too, you can just kind of Google it too and say, describe the anatomical man position. But you will be prompted to understand what that is like. So, in the anatomical position, this muscle is looking this way or whatnot. Or you may just have to simply describe it. Second, planes of the body. Planes of the body. So remember, we looked over different planes: sagittal plane, frontal plane, transverse plane. Um, Coronal plane. There were a couple that were a little bit tricky in there as well, but the different planes of the body, and we'll be expected to know this action. Let's say when I'm doing this action is done in this plane of the body. Okay, so let's say a jumping jack is done in the frontal plane. Okay, so we do our jumping jack, and that frontal plane divides the front and back halves of our body. So basically, our arms are just kind of going up and down, the legs are going out as well along that wall, that plane. So that's an example of that. Then we also have directional terms. Directional terms would be those things such as inferior versus superior. So inferior closer to the feet versus superior closer to the head. Distal and proximal, which again, where distal is and proximal are talking about the limbs basically, and they only refer to the limbs. So distal being further away from the midline of the body, proximal being closer to the body. And then classes of joints. So you'll be asked, what is the shoulder joint? Is it a diarthrotic, synovial? What is it? Is it a fibrous joint? Or an example of a fibrous joint is. And then we have examples of each type of joint too. So again, I kind of referenced that already. The knee joint is, here it's a synovial joint. Or the elbow joint is, or the sutures in the skull are this type of joint. Muscle actions. So when a joint is opening and closing, basically that's when we get muscle action, because the muscle is going across that joint and creating that action by pulling on the different bones. So what happens is things like flexion and extension. So for example, flexion of the elbow, extension of the elbow, flexion of the wrist, extension of the wrist, or something like that. Abduction, adduction. What's the difference between an agonist and an antagonist? Then locations. So you may be prompted to know, hey, the femur is located where, or something is located in this area. So they may not say the bone itself, or it may give you the bone. So it may go one way or another, like this femur is located in this area or in this area. You can find which bone, and then they'll have multiple choice where you get to choose the bone or something like that. Also, the general number of bones in each location. So mnemonics help you remember that. So remember when I said 8 osseous octopi, those kind of things. Help you to remember the number of bones in a certain area. We may say something like how many bones are in the forearm, the 2 bones, the radius and ulna, or how many are in the wrist, how many are in the palm of the hand, or something like that, or in the cervical region, which is 7 in the cervical region. And then the general name of bones as well. So your femur, like if you had a person there and you had to match the name of the bone to the area on the picture, you would say the femur is located here, or the sternum was located there, or something like that. And then location of muscles as well. So now with the muscles, we went over quite a few muscles, and we didn't want to overwhelm you, but I'm sure some of you were overwhelmed as well already. But even in like the forearm, there's a lot of muscles in the forearm. There are a lot of muscles in the lower leg as well. We didn't cover all of those little muscles, but it would be helpful to look over some of those, because you may have a question on there that says something like the the flexor carpi radialis or something like that is in what part of the body. Um, and if we think about it, the flexor means, oh, it's a flexing muscle. It flexes a joint, doesn't extend it, but it flexes it. Then the carpi radialis, so maybe the carpi has to do with like carpal bones or something. The radialis has to do with my radius. And so maybe it has to do something with my forearm. And you would be correct. So that's going to be one of the tips as well, is just to kind of break down the names of things. Okay, we didn't specifically cover all of those bones, but if you go in the workbook and you do some of the workbook activities where you're matching bones and muscles and filling in the blanks and things, that'll help create a good visual in your mind for these bones and muscles. So some of the tips that I would say: use various methods of study. So some of you have started doing flashcards. That's awesome. The workbook itself as well. Those couple things help with recognizing muscles and bones. And also, if you have something written or you rewrite over and over, you have this recognition of what you're writing next to that bone or muscle. It helps with visualization as well, and just sort of placing something in a different zone of the body. Um, and then the quizzes too. Look over all those quizzes, maybe retake some of the quizzes, or just look at the quiz keys as well, especially when you're questioning anything. That just helps with the comfort of looking for specific information. So the more you take quizzes, the more comfortable you get with it, because you know you're looking for specific elements in the question, kind of like the names of muscles and bones and joints and things in the question. You could ask someone else to quiz you from the quizzes that you have already, or maybe the person's just simply pointing to regions of the body or pointing to specific muscles, and you have to name them back to them or something like that. But having someone else help you sometimes is really nice too. And then think about the test questions as well. So when you are taking the test, so this is now when you're here, but when you are taking the test, think about the questions. Analyze, but don't overanalyze. And I know some of you are like, well, what's overanalyzing? I don't know. It's different for every person. But if you spend way too much time on a question, oftentimes we just end up choosing the wrong thing. Go with your gut instinct first. If that doesn't seem right to you, look at the question a second. Usually there's one very right answer. There's one that's kind of something that could be right. And then there's a couple that just are kind of off base usually. So look for cues within the question. If someone's asking you, or something is asking you for the name of a muscle or name of a joint or something like that, oftentimes the name of the muscle or the joint is in the question already. So, for instance, if someone's asking about the acromioclavicular joint, where is this located, or what two bones form this joint? Well, the name of the bones are right there, right in that term. So, acromioclavicular, if you break that apart, would be the acromion and the clavicle. And usually those answers are within the answers that you can choose from. Okay, so in terms of what you're going to see on there are 50 questions total, 27 of them, so the bulk of them, more than half of them, are going to be from multiple choice. So the answer is always there. Okay, the answer is always in the bank of answers that you can choose from. And so that's where that recognition comes in. There's 15 matching. With the matching, sometimes that recognition or visualization sometimes helps when you can kind of visualize what something is asking. And then there are 8 fill in the blank as well, meaning basically they're open-ended questions to some extent, and they're always asking for that one right answer. So there's 8 of those. So those are the only ones that aren't recognition per se, but there may be some visualization involved in those fill in the blanks. So that's what I got for you today. That is the first kinesiology exam. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out at any point via text or email, or give me a call too if you're kind of confused about anything. All right. Have a great day, and we'll see you this weekend.